David, I have a new friend on Facebook.
Do you?
Yeah, Maureen Blevins, aged 87, from Rich Hill in County Armagh. Could she be in any way related?
My mother. She's more active on social media than most octogenarians.
Well, good for her. And, hello, Maureen. Great to be connected.
Maybe she saw your Facebook profile and thought I had unfriended her and was reaching out to me.
She wouldn't be the first, won't be the last.
It's David.
And it's James. We're both in the Trump 100 studio in Washington, D.C.
One of Donald Trump's closest allies, Senator Lindsey Graham, has died suddenly at the age of 71. His death raises questions not just about who will replace him, but where it leaves the US Senate.
He's the man who once called Donald Trump a race-baiting, xenophobic, religious bigot. He was the anti-Trump who turned. They were big political mates in the end, and Graham's loss, it's a big political story, not least because of what it does to Republican numbers in Congress. Losing Graham leaves the Republicans a man down in the Senate. And I was down at his house earlier on, so were the FBI, and we'll take a look at what they were doing there.
Plus, the Memorandum of Understanding becomes the Memorandum of Misunderstanding. Iran and the US are back at it again, and now Donald Trump says he's the guardian of the Strait of Hormuz. How that will work is anyone's guess.
Yeah, and David, it's been a while since we talked ICE. Well, they haven't gone away, nor has the controversy. A man's died having come into contact with ICE agents in the state of Maine. It's the second death involving ICE officials in as many weeks.
So, James, Lindsey Graham, one of the most influential and longest-serving US senators, died suddenly in the early hours of Sunday morning. His death has stunned Capitol Hill. He had just returned from a trip to Ukraine where he'd met President Zelensky and visited a drone production facility. It was his 10th visit to the country, and he was due to appear on NBC's flagship political show, Meet the Press, on the morning of his death.
Yeah, in fact, somebody who spoke to him just before he died said that he'd been complaining of feeling unwell. This person said to him, "You should seek medical attention." Lindsey Graham, political operator, fixture on the Sunday morning shows, said, yeah, he would seek medical help, but only after he'd done the Sunday morning TV show.
He was 71 years old, James, and died from a cardiac arrest after a tear in his aorta, which sounds tragically straightforward. But that hasn't stopped Director Kash Patel and the FBI getting involved. They say out of an abundance of caution.
Yeah, David, there's no suggestion that anything sinister has taken place, but because of who he is and where he had just been in Kyiv, there's clearly an effort to remove all doubt. I was down at his house earlier on, just the other side from here of the Capitol building, actually. Spoke to his neighbours who actually said they didn't see much of him. He wasn't there too often. But she said it was all action on Saturday night into Sunday, when the ambulances turned up and so on. Today, there were FBI agents coming and going from his house. One man with a counter-terrorism task force jacket on, others with evidence response team. There was no real urgency amongst them, I have to say, coming and going, in and out his front door. Nothing to suggest there's any reason to contradict this line from the FBI about them acting with merely an abundance of caution. There is, of course, much online rumour, questions about Russian involvement and so on, whether he was poisoned, none of it substantiated.
Lindsey Graham was a prominent figure, largely because he once sought the Republican candidacy for the presidency himself, but particularly as a supporter of Donald Trump. And the president leaned on him heavily in recent years. But he'd been on quite the political journey, an establishment Republican, you might say, with a reputation for being able to negotiate across the aisle, something distinctly lacking in the politics of today. A man who pursued power and the powerful, and that's what aligned him with Trump ultimately. From staunch critic to loyal ally, a man who was pliable enough in his ideology to stick where he saw survival. Some would call that being a political operator, James. but others might call it moral bankruptcy.
Yeah, and I think even more would call it entirely in line with the politics of this country as it stands. And with the passing of the likes of Graham and members of that generation, we are seeing an end one by one of people who did do politics the old way across the aisle, negotiation. These days it comes down to hard division, antipathy, and, the passing of Graham and his like isn't great. Whatever you thought of his politics and that supple political ideology that he had, he had that animal cunning, much like Donald Trump actually, to chase where the power lay. Many people didn't like him for it, but ultimately, it gave him that longevity as a very prominent political player and political voice, particularly on the foreign policy stage. He was a big ally of Ukraine, Israel, and indeed Zelensky and Bibi Netanyahu. They have led tributes for Lindsey Graham. Netanyahu said Israel has lost one of its greatest friends. But of course, beyond Israel and Ukraine, domestically, Graham's biggest support was reserved for the boss, Donald Trump.
Yeah, he had a reputation for being a vocal hawk on Capitol Hill, regularly advocating for military intervention as he did with Iran. So Iran's response was very different to that of Israel, the country's foreign ministry spokesman, describing Lindsey Graham as an angel of death. Perhaps one of the biggest criticisms people had of him was that he was unrelentingly supportive of Trump. He would rarely stray from the president's viewpoint, no matter how difficult it was to square Trump's logic. His support for the president at times reached the point of ridicule. And Trump has, since his death, highlighted what a friend he was to the administration. But the relationship certainly wasn't always straightforward.
It wasn't. And, in a way, Lindsey Graham's path from MAGA hater to Trump lover, it's a symbol of how the US president has captured his own party and made it his. When Trump launched his first presidential campaign back in 2015, Lindsey Graham, well, then he was a rival candidate to Donald Trump and one of his fiercest Republican critics. On CNN, he told Trump to go to hell.
I want to talk to the Trump supporters for a minute. I don't know who you are, and I don't know why you like this guy. I think what you like about him, he appears to be strong when the rest of us are weak. He's a very successful businessman. He's going to make everything great. He's going to take all the problems of the world and put them in a box and make your life better. That's what he's selling. Here's what you're buying. He's a race-baiting, xenophobic, religious bigot. He doesn't represent my party. He doesn't represent the values that the men and women who wear the uniform are fighting for.
And the tit-for-tat didn't stop there. During a campaign stop in Graham's home state of South Carolina, Donald Trump read out the US senator's personal phone number, all to enrage his then opponent. Graham later said he had to throw that phone away to stop people calling him. And yet, despite the jabs and the insults, Trump calling him a disgrace and a nut job, Trump claiming Graham's closest friend, John McCain, was not a war hero, Lindsey Graham did fall in line once Trump had won the Republican nomination.
Yeah, he supported Trump wholeheartedly until a moment when he didn't. Actually, just after January the 6th, he, like so many other Republicans, drew what was then a line in the sand, even if it didn't quite last.
Trump and I, we've had a hell of a journey. I hate it being this way. Oh my God, I hate it. From my point of view, he's been a consequential president. But today, first thing you'll see. All I can say is count me out. Enough is enough.
We see him, David, following the arc of his own party, the hordes of Republicans who left Trump in 2020 and said never again. Just 3 years later, we're back in the fold, by his side, supporting his third tilt at the presidency. These accusations about Lindsey Graham, that he was spineless and that he swam with the tide of the GOP, the reality is he's exactly what the Republican Party has become as a whole, leeching itself to Donald Trump as soon as it realises that he is the key to power, to the White House, and it doesn't seem to matter the cost. As for now, well, Trump has said that he is devastated about Graham's passing, says he's lost a great friend and patriot, and that Graham's last words were to him, he says, to pass the Save America Act. Now, whether that's Trump's imagination or it was indeed the final act of a Trump loyalist, it's difficult to know. Could be either.
So the big question going forward is what happens next. Lindsey Graham was a senator for 23 years. His predecessor was Strom Thurmond, who had held the seat for 49 years. So South Carolina Senate seats don't come up very often. Cue a jostling to take over what is a relatively safe Republican seat. South Carolinian Congresswoman Nancy Mace was already at it on Sunday morning, posting on X how her eyes were on Graham's Senate seat after she crashed out of the state race for governor.
Donald Trump, though, has posted on Truth Social that he has recommended to Governor Henry McMaster that he appoint the sister of Lindsey Graham, Darlene, to replace him as a senator on an interim basis. She is the sister that Lindsey Graham adopted when their parents died. He was 22, she was 13 at the time. How much of a political player she is, I'm not sure. Her politics, well, they've been limited largely to supporting him. Actually, when Lindsey Graham launched a presidential campaign back in the day, he famously was unmarried and said that she, his sister, could be his first lady. Created a stir at the time. I'm thinking, David, that Trump is clearly eyeing the support of the woman who supported the man who supported him, if you're still with me.
Yes, it always leads back to Trump.
Yeah, Darlene, she was announced as the prospective interim senator on Monday afternoon, and she spoke to the public alongside Governor Henry McMaster.
I think this is what Lindsey would have wanted, and I plan to honor him in this way. Now to Lindsey, I miss you more than I can even put into words. But I'm going to do this. I got it. Thank you.
And that's the extraordinary thing about US politics, this ability to appoint non-political figures to incredibly significant roles. Yes, it's on a temporary basis, and there will be a special election in South Carolina to determine who will serve a 6-year term in due course. But for now, the more than 5 million residents of the Palmetto State will be represented by an American employment specialist with no political qualifications other than her being the sister of the late senator. So that leaves the US Senate with a total unknown, counting as a Republican vote, with a razor-tight margin in the chamber.
Yeah, whatever next. A reality TV star becoming president of the United States. But you're right, David, it's a tight margin, made even tighter by the absence of one very important and prominent Republican, the former Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, 84 years old. He's a Republican from Kentucky. He is the second longest serving senator in the House. And the thing about him right now is for weeks, he has been removed from the public view. That was until Sunday. I mean, he's not been well, but there has been a lot of speculation that the news about him could be far darker than merely being in a hospital bed. We have seen, however, the proof of life photograph issued by him in his hospital bed, and he does indeed look to be alive, even if clearly afflicted by illness currently.
Yeah, like a ransom photo. The newspaper date was used as proof of life after many thought the senator was no longer with us. Now, that speculation is not totally out of a vacuum, James. Mitch McConnell has had several health episodes in recent years. You remember him freezing twice on stage mid-sentence, in episodes that raised questions about whether he was simply too old to continue to represent Kentucky. A mild bout of pneumonia, so said the senator's team, but that's what's kept him away from the public eye, apparently for a month.
Yeah, the proof of life photo only came about after Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear wrote to the senator demanding evidence that he was still able to perform his duties as representative for Kentucky. And, like I say, that came after conspiracy theory upon conspiracy theory that he was on life support and his condition was being kept secret to protect the Republicans' small majority in the Senate. McConnell is set to retire at the end of this year. He has been instrumental in Donald Trump's presidency, not least because he spared him in his impeachment trial during his first term. Had he not done so, then there's every chance we would not have seen a second Trump term.
Yeah, during that second impeachment trial, McConnell said that Trump was, and I quote, practically and morally responsible for provoking the January 6th riots. But as you say, voted to acquit him, effectively saving his political career. Now, Mitch McConnell has been in the Senate since 1985. I was still in high school in 1985. Where was James Matthews?
Well, I was a bit older than you, David. I was, and I've said this before, I know, I was selling ice cream on the streets of Boston. I had a summer there when I was a student. And of course, every time I go to Boston, and I have just been there with the Tartan Army, I tell people, you know, I was here more than 40 years ago. And I'm always struck by how they could not care less. You can see them glazing over. Anyway, it's all very meaningful to me. But you know what, David? I think it speaks to, and here's a word for you, the gerontocracy in America. Mm-hmm. What does that mean?
Geriatrics running the house.
Well, I'm glad you know, because I couldn't tell you. It is a thing that so many of the powerful people in the United States are so old, not just the Republicans among them. Look at Bernie Sanders, independent. He's 85 this autumn. Dick Durbin, Richard Blumenthal, two powerful Democratic Party members in the Senate. They're both well into their 80s.
I'm beginning to think my 87-year-old mother should be running for a seat.
That's right, paging Maureen Blevins.
Not to forget the president himself. He's 80, of course, now. And then his predecessor, Joe Biden, had to actually drop out of the race for re-election because age had caught up with him. Now, away from Washington, but very much a White House policy showing its ugly side, a person has been killed in a shooting involving immigration agents in the state of Maine. We don't know much yet, but what we do know is that the shooting happened in Bidford, a town just south of Portland, the most populous city in the state.
Yeah, just before we started recording, the Colombian embassy said they are in contact with the relevant US authorities and with representatives of community organisations assisting in this case. We've also had a statement from the mayor for Bidford, Liam Lafontaine, and he says this: "This morning a human life was lost in our city. My thoughts are with the family and loved ones of the person who died as they face an unimaginable loss. They deserve compassion, dignity, and in time, a full understanding of the circumstances that led to this tragedy."
Yeah, there are some videos on social media which show agents surrounding a still body at a junction next to a car with bullet holes in the windshield and local police officers arriving at the scene. No body cam footage has been released by the Department of Homeland Security, at least not yet.
Yeah, it's the second time in as many weeks that somebody has died and there has been ICE involvement. Last Tuesday, a Mexican man who'd lived in the US for 35 years, he was fatally shot by ICE agents. Lorenzo Salgado Arrojo, a builder, was shot as he drove his construction crew to a job site in Houston. The Department of Homeland Security, they've already said that ICE were looking for somebody else when they tried to stop Arrojo's vehicle. Homeland Security, they say that he rammed the ICE vehicle and that an officer opened fire in self-defence.
Again, we've seen no pictures of this event. There's been no release of body cam footage, if indeed it exists. Meanwhile, Lorenzo Araujo's family have called for an independent inquiry into his death. And we saw big protests in Houston at the weekend. His death is the 10th fatal shooting by ICE officers since President Trump's second term began. Now, James, just before we wrap up, an update on what else but Iran.
What else indeed?
The US has reinstated the naval blockade in the Strait of Hormuz at the request of one Donald J. Trump.
Trump says the United States is taking over the waterway, acting as its guardian angel. The president also says that he's going to charge ships a 20% fee for crossing the body of water. How that will happen in practice, he hasn't made clear.
Of course, the reality is the Strait of Hormuz is international waters, so the United States has no legal authority to impose any charge on any vessel passing through it. what we can now see is that 3 weeks after the memorandum of understanding between the United States and Iran, there has been a misunderstanding. Let me just take you to point 5 of the 14 on that memorandum. It states very clearly that Iran will facilitate the safe passage of commercial vessels through the strait. The problem is that President Trump never intended to cede control, and that's why he's now taken to Truth Social to announce that he is reimposing the naval blockade on Iranian ports and to claim that the United States is, as he puts it, the guardian of the strait in capital letters, and insisting that it's open. He posted the word open twice in capital letters because, of course, he knows the economic impact of it being closed.
This talk, David, for me, of Trump operating as a guardian angel, it's a man being dragged clearly into a forever war who has no control over its direction and needs a headline, I think, to get him through the day. Today, he's talking about guardian angels. You know, assuming there is substance to that it is an actual sign of intent to be taken seriously, it looks very much to me like mission creep in a mission that is increasingly undefined and changes from one day to the next.
Yeah, and not for the first time, James. Iran's foreign minister is mocking the President of the United States. Abbas Araghchi posted on X, POTUS is absolutely right. Whoever provides secure and safe passage of commercial vessels through the Strait of Hormuz should be compensated for the service. Iran has always been the guardian of the strait and will remain so forever. 20% is, of course, too much. He added, we will be fair. Worth pointing out, of course, that Iran too has no legal right to impose any charge on any vessel passing through the strait.
Yeah, they're playing the art of the deal, the master against the apprentice.
Playing him at his own game seems to be their style.
Yeah, the war of words continues, as does war itself. US Central Command, they've released pictures of strikes on a naval base in Iran overnight, the first use of sea drones in combat. Iran, it's retaliated by hitting US bases in Bahrain and Kuwait.
And as a result, once again, oil prices have risen sharply. The benchmark oil price, a barrel of Brent crude, hit over $83, an increase of nearly 10% since the last day of trading closed. That's the biggest one-day surge in more than 3 months, James.
Yeah, we're a long way from America achieving the aims as stated at the start of this, are we not? With an adversary that's exerting control, entirely geared up for lengthy attritional conflict, and acutely aware, Iran, of how it can hurt Trump politically. Because remember, Iran has played this game before at the end of the Carter administration, using US hostages as a bargaining chip at that time that ultimately lost Carter the presidency.
History repeating itself on another blockbuster day. Thanks for listening. As always, if you have any questions or comments, do send them to us at trump100@sky.uk.
Yeah, we'll be back on Friday with our regular episode, and of course, at the end of the week, if you're a UK listener and over the age of 18, you can subscribe and listen to our latest episode of Sky News Insider. That's out every Saturday. Terms and conditions apply.
We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
All the best.